The Dancing Plague of 1518. In the summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg, part of the Holy Roman Empire, became the stage for one of the strangest events in recorded history. It was an event so bizarre that even today, over 500 years later, historians and scientists still struggle to explain it. The people of Strasbourg began to dance, not in celebration, not for ritual, and not for joy. They danced uncontrollably, relentlessly, and sometimes to the point of collapse or even death. This is the story of the dancing plague of 1518. The First Dancer. It all began in July of that year with a woman named Frau Trophäa. She walked into the narrow cobbled streets of Strasbourg and began to dance. There was no music, no festival, no wedding or feast. Just one woman, moving her body frantically, as though possessed by some invisible force. At first, the neighbors watched in amusement, but as the hours passed, they began to worry. Frau Trophäa could not stop. She danced through the day, and when night fell, she continued into the darkness. For days she spun and twisted, unable to control herself, until her body finally gave out. But the strange affliction did not end with her collapse. In fact, it spread. An epidemic of dancing within a week, dozens of people joined Frau Trophäa in her uncontrollable frenzy. Men, women, and even children poured into the streets, their bodies jerking and spinning in unnatural rhythms. Eyewitness accounts describe their faces twisted in pain, their feet bleeding from the relentless motion, and yet they could not stop. By the end of the month, the dancers numbered in the hundreds. The streets of Strasbourg echoed not with music, but with the sound of exhausted bodies slamming against the cobblestones, of ragged breathing, and of cries for help from those who could not control their limbs. This was no festival. It was a nightmare. The authorities step in. The city's leaders were baffled. Strasbourg was a deeply religious city, and many believed the dancers had been cursed by Saint Vitus, a Christian saint thought to hold power over neurological disorders. The authorities decided to treat the plague with more dancing, believing the only cure was to let the dancers exhaust the sickness from their bodies. They built guild halls, hired musicians, and even brought in professional dancers. Imagine the sight. An entire town square filled with hundreds of people, some afflicted, some simply watching, while hired bands played non-stop music for days. Far from healing the sufferers, the relentless encouragement only made the problem worse. The toll of the plague reports claimed that many dancers collapsed from exhaustion. Some suffered strokes or heart attacks. Others simply wasted away, their bodies unable to withstand the endless motion. Chroniclers of the time claimed dozens died. Some even wrote of hundreds. What made this plague so terrifying was not only the uncontrollable nature of the dancing, but also the fact that it spread like wildfire. Witnessing the dance seemed to trigger it in others, as if suggestion alone could infect a person's body. For nearly 2 months, Strasbourg was a city gripped by madness, theories and explanations. Over the centuries, scholars have debated the cause of the dancing plague. Religious hysteria. Some historians argue that the dancers were swept up in mass psychosis, a phenomenon where fear and superstition cause entire groups to lose control. Strasbourg was suffering from famine, disease, and poverty at the time. Perhaps the people's stress exploded in the form of mass hysteria. Ergot poisoning. Others suggest the people ate bread contaminated with ergot, a toxic mold that grows on damp rye. Ergot contains chemicals similar to LSD, which can cause hallucinations, convulsions, and muscle spasms. Could the townspeople have been poisoned into madness? Neurological disorder or stress response. Modern scientists sometimes frame the plague as a collective stress-induced illness, where psychological trauma manifests in the body. In a time of famine and despair, perhaps the people's bodies rebelled in the only way they knew how, through uncontrollable dance. None of these explanations fully satisfy the mystery. The end of the plague. Eventually the dancing slowed. Victims were taken to a shrine dedicated to St. Vitus, where priests prayed over them, sprinkled holy water, and performed rituals of healing. Slowly, the plague faded, leaving behind confusion, fear, and awe. The streets grew quiet once more, but the memory of those months lingered for generations. Legacy of the Dancing Plague. The Dancing Plague of 1518 remains one of history's strangest medical mysteries. It stands as a reminder of the power of belief, the fragility of the human mind, and the deep connection between body and spirit. Some call it a curse, others a sickness, still others a window into the psychology of a desperate people. Whatever the cause, it has never been repeated on such a scale again. To this day, Strasbourg's bizarre summer of dancing remains unexplained, a haunting dance with death, echoing across the centuries. And so, we are left with the question, why did hundreds of people dance themselves to death in the streets of Strasbourg? Was it the wrath of a saint, the poison of a fungus, or the madness of the human mind under unbearable stress? The truth may never be known, but one thing is certain, the dancing plague of 1518 will forever remain one of history's most chilling and unforgettable mysteries.